放下你再回再好吗？ OK， 这样可以，好像有点不太清楚。
那个应该就没办法，
没有办法。
反录或镜头。
OK， 好。
Good everyone. Alice, welcome to join us today. Today's we have lots of speakers. The first part from the classroom, and the other part from the online meeting from the undergraduate students who are interested in this topic. And Alice Hsieh is now working in San Francisco, a consulting company called Accenture, one of top 3 consulting companies. And she's now working on a project related to a very big bank, a United States bank, related to digital banking transformation. So we are very honored to have her here today, her experiences related to it, because fintech and the bank 4.0 is a very hot issue that everyone should know about it. And Alice Hsieh has been graduated from UC Berkeley in 2017 to 2018. So she's still very young, and she had a short experiences in Merrill Lynch, internship, and then the Roche company for a short time. In UC Berkeley, she attended a lot of clubs related to like visual reality, artificial intelligence, and so on. So she's very, very the trend in this field. But she's very young and very similar age as you. So I invite her for another motivation is to encourage you all that you can do everything you want, because Alice is still very young, very similar to you. And let's welcome Alice. Alice, let me introduce you for a little bit. And then
okay. Yeah, okay, thanks, Professor. And hi, everyone. My name's Alice. I'm very honored to have the opportunity to be here today to talk to you all about digital banking transformation and how, as a consulting firm, how we help our banking clients improve their business from loan originations to loan servicing through large-scale transformation and system implementations. So I think this seminar is going to be a little bit different from what you're used to, because it's going to be less research-based and more on the practical side, as we're going to be talking about, we're going to be looking at the current industry trends, some of the business challenges that banks are facing nowadays, and what consultants like myself do on a day-to-day basis to help implement these changes for these big banks. So I'm going to share my screen, and please let me know if you guys are able to see my slide. Give me 1 second. Okay. Can you guys see my my PowerPoint? Okay, I'm going to take that as a yes. Okay, so here is the agenda I have for today. So I'm going to start off with a quick introduction about myself and my company, because I know it can be a little bit confusing in terms of what consulting really is. And we'll do a quick overview on commercial lending. And today we're going to be focusing primarily on loan servicing and the business challenges that some of the banks are facing nowadays. And then we'll do a deep dive into industry perspective and value proposition, and end with a case study, which is actually the project that I am working on right now with one of the major banks around the world. And then we'll do a quick Q&A session. So a little bit about myself. I'm from Taiwan, like many of you here. And I graduated from UC Berkeley with a degree in economics back in 2018. And I've been working at Accenture as a management consultant in San Francisco. So I'm part of our strategy and consulting banking practice. And what that really means is just the clients that I work with are primarily banks. So for example, like your Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase, Citibank, etc. And I specifically do mostly digital banking transformation, system implementations, commercial/corporate lending, and operational excellence. So, and I do want to give a quick background about Accenture, the company that I work for, because I know it can be a little bit confusing, like what really is consulting. So Accenture is a leading global professional services company, and we provide a broad range of services and solutions in strategy and consulting, interactive technology and operations with digital capabilities across all of these services. And we have 4 operating units. So we have our strategy and consulting services, which is what I'm part of. And basically, the type of work that we do for strategy and consulting is helping transform our clients' organization so that we enable like competitiveness and help them drive growth and profitability. So that has a lot to do with like business technology strategy and your industry functional consulting. And then we have our interactive, which is more focusing on the innovative experiences that a user may experience. And then there's technology, which is quite self-explanatory. It's about like your application services and your software engineering. So helping our clients kind of build certain technology platform. And then lastly, there's operations. So this is more like we're running the business processes on behalf of our clients. So like if a client has a need for a specific function, we kind of outsource our talents to them. So these are the types of services that we provide. Today, we're going to be looking at mostly under strategy and consulting. And this slide kind of shows the different types of industries and industry groups that we work with. So first, we have our communication media technology. So this really just means that the clients that you work with are tech clients. So for example, Google, Facebook, Amazon, all these big companies that you probably have heard of, we work with them. And then you have your financial services, which is like your big banks. So Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase, Citibank. So today we're going to be focusing on financial services. And then there's also health, public services, products, resources. So the idea is just to say that like we work with a broad range of clients and every industry in different industries. So there's many different types of work that we do as a consulting firm as a whole. But today we're going to be focusing on banking. And then this is just a quick overview slide on just like our business. So we have about like 500,000 people across the world, over like 200 cities, 120 countries. We do have an office in Taiwan, Taipei as well. So if any of you are interested, please let me know. So this is just a quick overview of Accenture and consulting firm as a whole. Yeah, so if there are no questions, oh, by the way, if anyone has any questions, please just speak up. I do want this to be interactive and not just me talking all the time. So if you have any questions, like don't be shy. Okay, so let's kind of dive into the main topic for today. So I want to start off with a quick overview on commercial lending. So what is commercial lending? So a commercial loan is a debt-based funding arrangement between a business and a financial institution, such as a bank. So it's typically used to fund like major capital expenditures and cover operational costs that the company may otherwise be unable to afford. So the concept of commercial lending is pretty simple. A business goes to a bank and they want to borrow a loan. So if Foxconn wants to build a new factory in China, they might need to, borrow some money from the bank in order to do that. So that is commercial lending. So from a customer perspective, it's pretty simple, right? But what's actually complex is from an internal bank perspective on how the loan flows, how the process of kind of like applying for the loan and then all the way getting that loan funded and booked. So, and that's what we called the loan life cycle. So this is actually a really good slide. So this is an overview of the key activities that kind of happens in a loan process. So this is all like within the bank, right? So if a client comes to a bank and they want to ask for a loan, so first it kind of starts off with prospecting and pipeline management. So this is when your relationship manager kind of sources the potential clients, and then it goes to, and then when the client actually wants to apply for a loan, it goes to credit structuring and approval. So this is when they kind of do your credit check to make sure that like you have the right credit so that they approve you for the loan. And then once the loan is approved, it goes to closing, booking and funding. And then after which means that like the loan is actually booked in the system, and then the client actually gets the money. And then after the loan is funded, it goes into portfolio management. So this is the basic loan life cycle. And we kind of call like this stage from prospecting all the way up until booking and funding loan origination. So that's when you apply for the loan and then you get the money. And then after the money is funded, it's called loan servicing, which is when the bank kind of services the loan. So that's kind of like when the bank is making sure like the customer is paying back the loan and then keeping track of all the payment records and then sending out notices and all that. So there's two like key phases, I would say. And if you look at the slide, it looks pretty simple, right? Like there's only like 4 main phases. But if you look underneath, there are all these activities that are happening. And then there are also many teams that are handling this entire process. So this is where the problem that a lot of banks are facing nowadays is that the platform that traditional banks use to handle all these activities are very outdated. And as a result, it requires a lot of manual touch points, which results in like inefficiency and an inefficient process and slow turnaround rates. So what we do as part of our like digital banking transformation is to help our clients upgrade or replace their existing technology to the best in the market in order to enable their digital capabilities and allow for a more efficient loan process. So here's another slide that you can kind of see. So it kind of starts off, so there are all these like activities and teams that are involved when in commercial lending. So today we're actually going to be focusing more on this onboarding and servicing part, which happens after the client has already been approved and funded for the money. So this is when, so this part of the loan life cycle is when the client is, like paying back their money to the bank. And we're going to be talking about what are some of the leading vendors that banks are using right now in order to like upgrade their technology so that they can better handle this process. So any questions on commercial lending before I kind of dive into the meat of the discussion? Okay, so let's take a look at the business challenges that banks are facing nowadays for loan servicing. So let's take a look at the landscape first for commercial banking. So recent market research has shown that commercial banking is on a rise at an exponential rate. So what that really means is that the corporate banking revenue pool is very attractive and there's a lot of opportunities. So commercial lending especially is still a significant part of the corporate banking revenue. So for example, in 2018, it was like over $500 billion in revenue. So it's a very attractive and it's a very attractive pool for banks to make money. So this is the first thing. And then we also need to consider that the market is changing, right? So there are a lot of industry shaping factors that are rapidly evolving, which requires banks to be very intentional about making decisions to invest in new technical capabilities and transforming their business operations, right? So for example, like what's changing? Your customer expectations are always shifting, right? So traditionally, like a customer may only want to work, they may always work with a certain bank, but that's not the case anymore because customers nowadays, like business customers, they're open to working with other banks. So there's a lot of competition in the market. And that kind of leads to the next point, which is competitive dynamics are also changing. So expansion of alternative lenders results in market saturation. So there are a lot of lenders in the market right now. So the competition is very high. And there's also an increase of interest rates and tightening of credit spreads. And then the next one is internal operational challenges. So like I mentioned earlier, in the loan life cycle, there's origination and then there's servicing. So your origination is when your client applies for the loan and then gets approved and then actually gets funded, right? So that's called origination. And some of the challenges that a lot of the banks are facing nowadays in this phase of the life cycle is that there's a lot of heavy administrative work, which results in like slow turn times and low pull-through rates. So for example, there may be like 10 businesses that want to borrow money from a particular bank, but because the turnaround rate is so slow, which is mostly caused by like inefficient processes and outdated technology, the turnaround, maybe only 2 of these deals actually pulls through, right? So that's like a 20% rate, and then you lost all the 80% that you could have had. So and then on the servicing part, some of the challenges that they're facing nowadays is like role responsibility overlap and efficiency. So like multiple people doing the same type of work, or it's just like too many manual touch point, like poorly defined handoffs, and there's a high degree of risk because of manual processing. And the last one is legacy technology unable to keep pace. So that's kind of what I was saying earlier. A lot of the traditional banks, their technology that they're using right now to for their loan process is very outdated, right? So there's a lot of fragmentation and duplication, limited integration and flexibility, lack of required functionality. So for example, like the ability to process multi-currency loans, and then just inability to support new innovative technology opportunities. So these are all the factors that are changing in the market, and that's causing banks to really like rethink their decision to like invest in new technology. So here I have a stat that says that greater than 29 billion in technology spending is forecasted for North America's wholesale lending unit. So like this is something that banks are recognizing, and then they're spending money to upgrade their technology in order to keep up with the changes. So let's take a look at drivers of servicing transformation. So they're both external and internal pressures that are driving our banking clients to really rethink their operating model and invest in platform-enabled servicing transformation. So the first one is continued business growth, right? So like I said before, commercial lending, it's a big revenue pool. So because the revenue is, there's so much like potential there, they definitely want to invest in new technology in order to be able to, like sustain this growth. And then there's the emergence of new technology, for example, blockchain, that like I'm sure a lot of you have heard of, and the adoption of automation and digital technology. So kind of moving away from the traditional like manual workflow and having things more automated. And then you have your accelerated IT investments by your North American competitors. So here it's like $16 billion have been spent on IT since 2016, right? And it's like a 5% growth. So a lot of your competitors are investing their money in technology. So as a result, like you also start to think about like whether like you should be doing the same, right? Or else you're behind. And then you have your operational challenges, which is kind of similar to what we talked about in the previous slide. So you have processing inefficiencies, right? Like there's so many tools that people are using, or different tools that people are using in order to book a loan. And there's a lack of intelligent automation because people are doing everything manually, and then heavy emphasis on manual data entry. So that's like, like all these manual workflow is slowing down your operational efficiency. And then you also have your data challenges, right? So the traditional technology that a lot of the banks have decentralized data. So it's very hard if you're trying to like, let's say like pull a report on something, like if you want to understand like how long it's taking my team to book a loan, or like how long does it take for a customer to come to apply for a loan and then up until it's booked. Like the data that these outdated platforms have, it's very decentralized. So you can't really form like really meaningful like data from it. And then that kind of leads to your legacy IT challenges, right? So your infrastructure is outdated. There's very limited cloud enablement. I think we can all relate that like banks traditionally are just a little bit outdated in terms of their IT. Like there's a lot of manual work, and everything's like on paper, but like we are really trying to move to cloud nowadays. So that's like one of the challenges that I have. And then the platforms are not customized to support what the bank really needs. Yeah, so, and then the last one is focus on growth, right? So like growth in high-end lending markets continues to be like a very attractive revenue driver. So you want to have the right technology in order for you to sustain this growth, right? So legacy platforms do not support for portfolio expansion, which leads to banks wanting to replace that. Yeah, so these are some of the drivers in terms of why banks will want to like undergo this type of transformation / implementation. Okay, so are there any questions so far in terms of some of the business challenges that banks are facing nowadays and why they would want to move to a more digital capacity? Okay. All right. Okay, so the next section I have is industry perspective and value proposition. So industry perspective. So here is a overview of servicing transformations that's happening across North America. So like I said earlier, today we're going to be focusing on loan servicing. And there are a couple primary vendors that offer their services. And today we're actually, so if you look at this map, these are like the top 20 plus banks in the US. And you can see that a lot of them use this platform called Loan IQ. So Loan IQ is a loan servicing platform, and 13 of the top 20 lenders in North America have implemented Loan IQ in order to help them manage their syndication book. But there are other service providers such as FS Vision, and I think there's another one that's not on this map. But this is just to showcase that a lot of these major banks that you may have recognized are going through this transformation to replace their legacy platform to, what's like most efficient in the market right now. And this is a graph on the approach to transformation. So in addition to IT changes, a successful servicing transformation also requires complementary strategy and operational model transformation. So it's not really just, we come in and then we like upgrade or like replace your current technology and then that's it. No, like So usually what we start off with is to have a strategic vision. So what does that really mean? So strategic vision is kind of like defining your ops and IT vision and the roadmap. So essentially, what do you want to achieve out of this, right? Like, what is your North Star? And what are some of the expected value prop and require investment that you need to make? And moving forward, like, what are some of the steps that you need to take along the way? So you really need to have a clear vision before you undergo like anything further. And the second step is your operating model. So what that really means is you need to design. So if you look at down here, here's defining the transformation strategy, and then you move into kind of executing the actual transformation. So operating model is kind of the beginning of the execution, right? So you need to design and implement the target operating model, which is what you like. It's like your goal, right, for your operating model. And this is going to update your existing processes and your organizational structure in order to drive efficiency and scalability. So here are some of the examples changes, right? So for example, traditionally, some of the loan admin activities are performed manually, but then in the future, maybe it could be replaced by robots. And then the second one is removal of redundant processes, right? To move to something more straightforward. And then a scalable virtual workflows to give it a variable cost model instead of fixed. And then you have like new organizational design based on activity, skills, and location of work performed. So these are some of the things that you want to think about for your operating model. And this is just a couple examples. Like there's like more to that. And then the third part is your technology refresh. So this is where, so a refresh can be like an upgrade or like a replacement of the application that you're currently using. So like upgrading your current servicing platform to enable new functionality, additional components in the technology, right? And then as a result of that, your total cost will reduce because as like unscheduled outages decrease and your maintenance support cost falls. And then there's also a decrease in your variable cost model. So this is like a high level approach to transformation. You start with you want to define your strategic vision, your operating model, and then you do the actual transformation. And then I'm going to have an example later in the presentation to walk through this, but this is just like a high level approach. And then what are the value at stake? So what are the value that you gain out of a transformation like this? So first one, growth, revenue, right? Like we've talked about this, commercial lending is a very attractive revenue pool. So growing your revenue is definitely the first thing. And how do you do that? So upgrading your platform allows for like increased growth in new or underutilized portfolios. So for example, like I was talking about earlier, sometimes your legacy or like if your technology is very outdated and your process is very manual, a lot of the deals actually don't pull through. But by going through this technology transformation, you now have a more efficient platform that allows you to really utilize some of the opportunities that you may have missed in the past. And then increase growth in existing portfolios. So, and how do we do that? So I'm not going to go too in depth, but like basically you increase the amount of loans that you can process in a more efficient manner. So as a result of that, you kind of increase your book, right? And then the second one is reduce cost. So you want to grow your revenue, you also want to reduce your cost. And the first one is reducing technology cost. Because the one thing about that a lot of the big banks are facing is that in order to process a loan, they may have to touch like 20 applications. Like there are many, but a lot of the platforms that are, or a lot of the technology that's offered on the market now really allows for that consolidation. So instead of maybe having to use 20 different applications by implementing like Loan IQ, let's say example, like you might only have to do 5. So reduce platform spend through IT consolidation is a big thing. And obviously like just like reducing your licensing cost and and the second one is reducing operational costs. So we kind of talked about this before too, right? So you're reducing your workforce because things are more automated and reduce manual handoffs and redundancies and just enable process automation. So as a result of that, it really allows for reduction in total IT costs, reduction in customer response time, and then increase in operational efficiency. And then the last one is manage risk. So this is actually very important. So like reducing your credit loss and regulatory expense, as well as reducing your operational losses. A lot of the legacy platforms are just how a lot of the processes that banks traditionally have are very manual and people make mistakes. So that's part of managing risk. As things become more automated, it also reduces the possibility for manual errors. And you can also just reduce risk through like simplify regulatory data tracking. So this is actually very important because there's a reduction in like notice errors. So these are the values that you can gain through a transformation, like system implementation transformation. And this is a slide on the vendor landscape. So I kind of touched on this earlier. So there are 3 major core servicing accounting platforms that's kind of dominating the market. So all of these big banks that you may have heard of are upgrading to either AFS Vision, Finastra Loan IQ, or ACVS. And today we're going to be focusing on Loan IQ. So this one over here, where it kind of is responsible for 60% of the global syndication volume. And so these are the 3 leaders in the market right now. And there's continuing to be emergence of fintech players across the wholesale lending ecosystem. So as a client pursue a core platform transformation, it will be key to kind of align your vendor selection along with your vision for future integration. So it's very important that in this slide that we talked about, that you want to make sure you have the right vision, and then that helps you select the right vendor that you want your bank to use. Let's skip this slide actually. And this is just a comparison of the different types of loan servicing platforms that are available on the market right now. And you can see that each system kind of has their pros and cons, right? There's no really best platform. It's really dependent on what your bank needs. So today we're going to be, today we're going to be focusing on Loan IQ. Like the case that I'm going to be talking about is a Loan IQ implementation. And you can see that a lot of these major banks have already upgraded their system to Loan IQ. So, and let's just take a quick look at some of the platform capability highlights, right? So for Loan IQ, it's the best in class market feature for high volume, complex, syndicated finance and capital markets. So it's really good for big loans, basically, or like if you have a lot of loans coming in. It's really good for their notification process to the borrowers, flexible client-driven maintenance enhancement. So what this one really means is that the platform, it's customizable to fit the client's need. And we can talk about this a little bit later, but yeah, so there's supports multi-currency, high degree of published APIs for data access, and large client footprint globally. So I think overall, LoanIQ is the most adopted platform across North America for banks. But doesn't necessarily mean that it's better. It's just that it suits the needs for majority of the large banks. And this is a quick slide on the strategic direction. So every transformation is going to be different. We'll talk about that once we get to the case portion, but the first step, so there's really no like one size fits all approach, right? So, which is why, again, it's very important to pave the right path through your strategic objectives. So the first step really is your platform replacement, right? So you want to pick the platform that you want to use to upgrade your existing system. And that typically takes 12 to 24 months. So it's not short, it's pretty long. And then the second part is operations optimization. So once you have your platform replaced, you want to think about how the roles in your existing organization may be different. So there's some part of redesign that needs to happen. And you also want to build your center of excellence and just, process optimization and task automation. So from an operations perspective, you want to consider what's the best way to optimize that. And then the third part is credit transformation. So once you have the first two steps done, this is your credit transformation where you are now able to expand your portfolio, your market, your data is now modernized, and then your IT footprint is consolidated, and now you have your intelligent automation. So this is kind of like the end result, right? So if you look at the timeline, together it's pretty long. It's not a couple weeks thing. It's a multi-year effort in order to undergo this types of transformation. Yeah, and then this is kind of just another, I think we can skip this slide. But basically, this is just a quick high-level overview of some of the activities that we do with clients in order to undergo this transformation. So you have your analysis phase, and then determining your strategy and roadmap. You pick your vendor, and then actually execute the planning, and then the actual execution. And we can talk a little bit more in the case study, but this is a high-level overview of just the industry perspective and some of the value propositions that banks can gain out of this type of change. So are there any questions so far? I know I've been talking for quite a while. And the next portion is a case study. So before we dive into that, are there any questions for anyone? Okay.
Can they ask in Chinese?
Yeah.
不好意思，就是我想问一下，就是美国银行那边会怎么去衡量？
我有点听不清楚，你可以再讲一次吗？
不好意思，就是我想问一下，就是我想了解，就是美国那边的银行在做的时候，会考虑哪一些
会考虑哪一些什么因素？其实还蛮多的。I think maybe when we get to the case study, it might help. 因为 so the next 下一个阶段就是 case study. I'm gonna be talking about 就是我们真的在做这些implementation 的时候，会跟 client 做的一些讨论。所以我觉得可能会 answer 你的 question。但是其实 if I from a high level 的话，其实还蛮多。就是第一个当然就是要考虑说，就是像我之前讲的，就是你的vision 是什么？就是你的一些，就是每个 bank 都有一些他们不同的 challenge，所以呢，就是 depending on what the problems that they have，所以他们要选的一些，就是他们要选的 vendor，还有他们想要他们的 scope 会不一样，所以就是每个 project 第一件事情就是要 define 它的 scope，所以然后这个 planning portion 的时候，他们就会考虑，就是有很多不同的东西要考虑。那通常第一个当然就是时间，就是像我刚才有说，就是每一个 project 的 timeline 其实还蛮长，它不是几个礼拜，它可能是好几年，所以呢 timeline 是一个。然后呢，当然就是 cost is another thing。然后呢，我等一下的 case example 会有一些可以给大家大概知道说这些 digital transformation 大概会就是它的 cost 会是什么。然后呢，还有很多就是我们需要 provide 的一些，我们可以 provide 的一些就是 talent，就是我们的人 like if how knowledgeable they are and like our experience。因为 yeah but I think 这个 case 可能会解释一些。那 but 如果没有的话，我等下可以再 answer。but 还有其他问题吗？就是 before 我开始讲这个 case。Okay, so this case is actually, this project is actually the current project that I'm working on right now. So this is my team, and we are doing a loan IQ implementation for the third largest agency bank in the world. So I'm not going to disclose which bank this is, but it is a bank that I'm pretty sure everyone knows. So some of the client challenges that this bank has, oh, my bad, is that they're faced with regulatory pressure to transform its commercial and corporate lending architecture. So what they want to do is to migrate its loan servicing platform from their legacy system to Loan IQ, which is what I talked about earlier. And then the solution that our company is offering is that we own the overall program management and are responsible for the implementation. So we basically deliver project management, integration, operational reporting, testing, data migration, and training. So these are the deliverables that we have. And we also support the application and functional design, where we partner with Nastra, which is the
Alan，好像 connection 有点不对。Alan，来检查一下好不好？网络没有问题啊？是网络吗？他们。
Hey, sorry. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry, I think my internet disconnected. Where did I leave off? Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I think I got disconnected earlier. Do you remember where I was? like 我刚刚讲到哪里？
Yeah, this page.
Like, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna continue. Can you see my screen? Is the slide showing?
All transformation.
Yeah, okay. So should I start over from here?
Yeah, I think it's this page.
Okay. So this client wants to replace their current legacy system to LongIQ. And Accenture, as the consulting firm perspective, this is what we're offering, right? Like we have all these deliverables, and we're also bringing our internal workforce, which is, from a strategy and consulting, technology, offshore, and BPO perspective. So this is an end-to-end. This is an end-to-end process that we're offering. And what are the expected value for the client? So the expected value that we have for this client is that they should benefit from a 10% increase in growth, which is outpacing the marketplace, right? And a 20% reduction in operational cost, and a reduction in near miss financial losses, which is tracked at almost 2.5 billion over the past 5 years. So if you just read this statement, it kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier. When you have outdated platforms, there's a lot of missed opportunities. So here, like for this particular client, it's $2.5 billion, like it's a lot of money, right? And we're also helping the client source LongIQ talents across the marketplace so that they can adapt to the changes more easily. So what that really means is when you migrate to new technology, it takes time for your employees to get used to that. So having people that are really familiar with the platform is very important. And key topics and technologies. So we work directly with the vendor, so in this case, Finestra, on this implementation. And then the expected deliverables and outcomes. So the delivery and implementation of LongIQ is in 2021. So we are expecting, well, actually, we already went live for our MVP, but our first release is expected actually in November 2021. And then we have a roadmap for future releases from 2022 to 2024. So right now, the release is only for North America, but eventually it's going to go to EMEA, which is Europe, and APAC, so Asia. And we're going to help them create a sunset strategy to retire legacy platforms and migrate execution of nearly 1 trillion portfolio loans. And then by 2024, we're going to add additional legacy technology sunset strategies globally to help them reduce their overall technology spend. And then I want everyone to take a look at this account snapshot. So the timeline is 2020 to 2024. And again, it goes back to the point where I'm saying this transformation takes a long time. It's not a couple weeks or couple month effort. It's a multi-year project. And the deal value is actually $38 million. So this $38 million goes to is the amount of money that the bank is spending, not just on the platform itself, not just the license fee, but also to bring in people like myself and my team to help them implement this change. So it is a big spending. It's not cheap. So this just showcases again, like how important, like how banks are realizing the importance of upgrading their technology so that they're able to improve their growth and revenue. So this is a snapshot of this client. And I think I'm just going to be really brief on this slide because it's basically just talking about what LongIQ is, which I kind of talked about. It's a leading software for syndicated lending and secondary trading services and accounting. So it's essentially a loan servicing platform that helps manage the loan after it's been booked. So it manages activities such as making sure that the customer is paying back the loan, and then records of these payments and all these like maintenance activities. And then the key objective for this project is to replace their current servicing system called FlexQ with LoanIQ. The project kicked off in February 2020, and we are expecting the new money installation and production in May 2021. We already have a soft launch, but the formal go live is in May 2021. And then the EMEA go live is 2022, APAC go live is 2023. And the key objective is to enable ability to grow books of business while not increasing your cost, and reduce risk by reducing near miss opportunities, which we talked about earlier, gain market share in the global syndication marketplace, standardized data model to reduce regulatory risk, modernize and automate processes, and optimize your workflows, reduce annual technology and operation spend. So very similar to what we talked about earlier. Okay, and this slide is actually, so this slide kind of sums up what we do on the ground, like what consultants like myself and people on my team do on a day-to-day basis in order to enable this transformation. So this is like the execution part that we saw earlier from the slide. And not sure if anyone's familiar with the software development lifecycle, but basically it's the application of standard businesses to build and implement software applications. So in this case, it's LoanIQ, right? And the first phase that we do is planning. So relating to the question we had earlier, this is the phase where you consider, like why you want to implement, the cost of implementing, and the scope of implementing. So defining your scope, making sure that, you're okay with the cost, understanding what the team structure is going to be like once this implementation begins. That all goes into the planning phase. And then the next phase is defining your requirements. And what this means is very simple. It's basically what you want the platform to do for you as a user. So you typically, as a consulting firm, this is where we work with the clients, and we go through a list of requirements of what the client expects the system to do. The system, LoanIQ itself, comes with a lot of functionalities, but the basic functionalities may not satisfy what the client needs. So in this stage, this is where we define the requirements, what the client wants the system to do. And these are like actual like written requirements that usually go something like, user wants to be able to book a loan using LoanIQ. Like it's as simple as that, or it can get very complicated and specific. I think the current project, so this project that I'm working on, we had like over like almost 1,000 requirements, and that leads to the next phase of design and prototyping. So basically the design is based on the requirements. So LoanIQ itself, out of the box, it works fine. But then, as I said earlier, there are specific requests from the client. So this design phase is really dependent on the requirement phase. And then the design phase, you actually engage with the client, understand their needs, and then you, from a functional perspective, design the software. And then your software development phase, it's your build, right? So this is where your technology folks comes in and actually code and configure the application. So these are all linked, right? The requirement leads to the design, and then the build is based on the design. And then after the build is complete, it goes into testing. So before the application is actually released to actual bank users, we normally do testing internally to make sure the system is integrated. And then we also do like user acceptance testing, where we pick a couple users from the bank and and test the platform to make sure that it's working as expected. And if there are any defects, it goes back to the technology people to fix. And after testing is completed and we make sure that the platform is working as expected, that's where deployment happens, which means that now the platform is live and the bank users are actually using. And then it goes into operations and maintenance, which basically just means that if a bank user is using this platform and then they identify a problem, then we fix the problem, right? It's like fixing a bug. So this is the 7 phases of software development lifecycle. And this is basically what we do as consultants, right? Right now, we're honestly at the deployment phase already. So we've already gone through all of this in the past year and a half. And now we're ready to deploy a system and have users like actually start using it. And then I'm also going to kind of give an example of how our teams are structured so you kind of understand. But these are just some of the guiding principles that we follow as we do these types of implementation. The first one is really to define the scope, right? Like it's very important that in this planning phase, you know what you're working on. And that's actually one of the biggest problems that we face as consultants is that our clients like to change the scope, right? Sometimes like they may say that, oh, like in the beginning, they only want like this functionality, but then later in the implementation, they change their mind. So it's very important to make sure like you have your scope defined. And then you also don't want to, so the 80-20 rule is just saying that even though you can customize this application, you want to try to keep, so it's kind of similar to the first part, right? Like 80% of the configuration design will be based on the initial like BPA, which stands for business process analysis decisions. And then the remaining 20% will be captured subsequently. And then teams will adopt the Low IQ business process model. So when you switch to a new platform, you also want to adopt to a new, you will have to adopt to a new process. And then you having these BPA workshops to make sure that you're aligned on your future state processes, making sure that you're completing the configuration design and gather requirements. So remember this part that we talked about. This all happens during this workshop, and then making sure that you have the right project governance and control so that decisions are made in a timely manner. So this is our project scope. So I don't think I need to talk about the top 3 because we've talked about that extensively, but these 6: integration, reporting, conversion, infrastructure, testing, and training. So these are actually, we call it work stream, but it's like basically individual teams within the project team. So my project right now is about, I would say like 60 people. So it's pretty big. And there are 6 teams here that are responsible for different aspects of the implementation. So there's integration that kind of talks about like, so integration is making sure that your existing interface will integrate with the new platform. And then tech infrastructure is making sure that it's just making sure that like you have your environment strategy. So like as we're building these codes, the codes are deployed correctly. Reporting is just making sure that all the existing reports that the bank has will be carried over, or if they new reports design. Conversion is making sure that all the loans on their existing platform will be converted and carried over to the new platform. And then testing, we talked about earlier, just making sure that the platform is functioning as expected. And then lastly, your training is to make sure that the users know how to use a new platform. So these are some of the teams that we have. And some teams are bigger than others, like integration right now is about like 10 people. Testing is like 10 people, but like some teams are smaller, right? Like reporting is like 5 people. So it really depends. But this is just a quick overview of the scope and some of the teams that we currently have working. And then the project team composition. So we have our client team. So that's the client, that's the bank, right? And the bank's role is to make critical decisions. They need to tell us what they want. Because we as consultants, like we know the platform, but we don't know what the client's vision is. So that's their job to tell us what their vision is and make decisions. So kind of what we talked about earlier, by providing your business requirements, support all these activities. And then there's us as a center consultants is to, oversee the overall management of the program, assist in design workshops, drive in design, build decisions, test, conduct training. So very similar to the software lifecycle that I talked about earlier. And then we have Finastra, which is Long IQ's company. And they're basically guiding the clients in initial training and then facilitating the business workshops and just lead like system configuration activities. So the main, I guess, the takeaway from this is that these implementations, it's also not a one-sided effort. It's not all consulting firms. We work directly with the client, we work directly with the vendor, we all work together in order to make this work. So it's not it's a collaborative effort. And then the rollout approach, which I kind of talked about. So we have all these teams available. We have all these teams, and that's on the ground working on different aspects of the transformation of the implementation. And then you have your like VPA analysis configuration. So this is like the raw approach, right? Each team has their own deliverables, but it all comes together to make this work. And what the BPA really is about is the first part is process mapping. So when you go through these transformations, the first thing you want to do is to outline your future state business process. So how a user would navigate the platform and like once the platform has been implemented. And the second part is the base code design, which is basically just the design phase that I talked about earlier. So design of the system. So these two are very critical because it's basically the foundation for us to configure the platform for the client. And then this is just another overview of the parallel work streams that we have. So kind of what I talked about earlier. So we have all these teams. Each team has their own deliverables working on a different part of the implementation, but it all comes together to make sure that at the end, the platform is implemented correctly and meets the client's needs. And this is just a quick slide on the governance structure. So, and it's just really saying that like there are different levels of governance. The very first one would be like, workstream support personnel. So that'd be someone like me who's like actually working on the deliverable for that specific workstream. And then there's usually a workstream lead that kind of oversees that entire workstream. And then you have your steering committee, which provides oversight to project execution. And these are typically senior leaders from the client side. And then your executive committee, so that's like your senior executive, like sometimes you're like your C-suites making like any final important calls. And this is the project plan for my current project right now. And as you can see, the deployment, it's a 4-year project, and not everything is released at once. It's like North America goes first, and then there's Europe, and there's APAC. So really the point of this slide is just showcase that like it is a multi-year effort. And right now, let's see. Right now we're somewhere like here, right? So we're in our year 2, and we actually already did our internal soft launch, but we're still waiting for the actual NAM deployment. Okay, so actually that is the end of my presentation. Yeah, I know I talked for quite a while actually. So are there any questions? Just anything like in terms of consulting, you know, anything that we talked about, commercial lending, anything related to the implementations that we do. So this is just an open section for any questions. I don't think I can hear if anyone is talking.那个搜讯好像有点不太好，所以我有点听不太清楚。
等一下，他从他的那边讲。
请问听得
那个网络好像不是太好，所以可能有点 lag。
这个 camera 可以开一下你自己的吗？
哦 ，OK。
就是前面有提到说那个软体的生命周期，它有分那几个阶段。那通常就是那个就是这整个步骤加起来，通常会需要花费多少年的时间？大概会？
你是说那个 software development 的 life cycle 吗？就是其实还是要看说是哪一个软体，所以每一个软体其实有点不一样。但是呢，就是我们今天讲的 example 就是 Loan IQ 的话，基本上就是应该怎么说呢？其实我 share 一下我的 screen 好了，等我一下哦。就是where is it？ 所以其实我会觉得说，基本上从 planning 到可能 deployment 的话，大概是1年到1年半。但是呢，这个1年到1年半呢，可能只是它的第一个 release。所以呢，就是通常这些 implementation 的话，它不会只有一个 release。像我刚刚有讲说，我们这个 client 它的时间轴其实是2020到2024。所以大概是4年的时间，但是现在2021我们已经准备要 go live， 就是 release 1， 然后 release 1只是 North America，and then there's gonna be release 2，which is 欧洲，然后 release 3是亚洲。所以呢，其实还是要，其实每一个软体，这个其实还是要看你是哪一个软体。但是呢，今天讲的 example 大概是1年到1年半，但是呢，你还是要 consider 说它之后会有 release 2、release 3，然后呢，每一个 release。就是他可能要从 define requirements 再整个再走一次，所以我会说一个 release 可能是1年到1年半，但是每一个 implementation 会有，就是可能会有很多个 release 这样。 这样我 answer 到你的 question 吗？我可能听不到，就是你们讲。
这样声音听得到吗？
现在听得到，
听得到。就是前面有提到说，那个银行会遭遇到就是或者 attention 啊视频这个问题。哦，那就是它里面有提到说56%会就是转而向其他银行去寻求更好的方案，是吗？那如果遇到这种情况，你们自己会提出什么？
对，那个最后一个地方我没有听到，你说就是遇到这种情况，然后会怎样？
会就是用某些方式在让他们这样回流，或者是有什么应对的方式吗？
我应对的方式我可能就是比较不太清楚，但是那个地方主要是就是算是我觉得因为 bank 应对的方式我可能比较不清楚，但是呢，就是那个地方主要是在讲说这些是一些就是 challenges that banks are facing， 所以呢，它必须要就是就是很要怎么讲，就是 they need to be competitive with the market， 所以呢，他们不会遇到这种方式，但是呢，就是从银行的角度，我可能比较不清楚，因为这是银行他们的一些就是他们的作为，我可能比较不清楚。但是呢，当然就是就是他们知道说这是一个问题，所以从我们就是 consultant 的角度呢，当然就是帮他们从就是 technology 的 perspective 来 help 帮他们 improve。但是呢，他们如果就是银行可能想要 offer 说一些 client 比较好的一些 you know like interest rate，like 他们的利息可能比较低，这些是还是要看银行他们本身。就是我们从我们的角度可能比较不清楚。
我有个问题，你刚刚提到就是说那个 38 million 的这个value 有没有？就是可能是一个成本嘛，对吗？就是这个成本其实蛮高的，在我看起来这已经是好几亿了。
对。
那怎么样子就是一个 bank 要 digitalize， 那这个可能说10亿、说9亿是多少钱呢？这个钱这么大，他怎么去 balance 这样的一个 trade off， 就是 cost 跟 benefit， 或者说这个成本怎么开销，或者是你们有没有考量这样？
就是因为我们的，所以这个$38 million，it's not， 它除了是就是买下这个软体之外，这个钱也是因为我刚刚有讲到说我们的 project 是大概60个人，所以其实从人力资源的部分，这就是一个很大的一个开销了。所以呢，就是基本上他们要请我们公司的人来帮他们做这些 implementation， 其实就是花费很高。然后呢，大家可能就是在国外的 consulting，其实就是如果没有疫情的话，就是我们其实很常需要出差，所以呢，因为呢，我们的一些 talent 其实不会是就是 locate 在一个地方，他们可能大家居住的地方都不一样，那这些开销也通常就是也会 include，就是可能要请我们就是飞去他们的就是 client site，所以这些开销也是全部加在这个$38 million里面。但就是我刚刚有提到说，其实虽然就是$38 million 很高，但是呢，他们 他们 implement 了这个 system 之后，他们的 expected value 其实也很高，就是呢，他们 expect 10% increase in growth，right？然后呢，他们在还没有 implement 这个 system 前，就是有$2.5 billion，其实是 it's like lost opportunities，right？所以其实你从一个 grand scheme of things 来看的话，其实$38 million compared to what they could get out of it's not a lot，就是他们之后，他们之后可以得到的 value 是比这个高的。
在线上的有没有问题？各位同学，你们可以回答一下吗？你们有没有问题呢？你们可以自己开一下麦克风，如果有问题可以问。有没有？同学在现场的还有问题吗？没有。
Okay, many thanks to Alice for the excellent presentation to introduce the new case study of America for one bank transfer the traditional bank to from the traditional bank to the digital bank. I think this case is much more valuable for us to understanding how fintech reshape our life. And the digital banking has been so important to us. Today we learned a lot from the Alice presentation for the three famous platforms that help each bank to transfer the digital bank and to useful funds. And aside that we know that a lot of cost to spend and to invest for the future benefit and saving costs, and also for the risk management in the future. So today's talk is really excellent, and Alice got a third shot last night, and she told me that he has a fever tonight. So many thanks for you to helping us to finish this summer. So thank you, Alice.
Yeah, thank you for joining me.
No further questions. Thank you, Alice.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.